Hello, and welcome to BOA Editions Reading and Conversation. My name is Sakshi Kumar, and I am the Adult Programs Coordinator at Writers and Books. I am an Asian American woman with brown skin and short black hair, and I am wearing a black long sleeve t-shirt. Writers and Books would like to call attention to the complex and troubled history of the lands on which we live and work. We are recording this panel from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Onondaga, or the people of the Great Hill. In English, they're known as the Seneca people or the Keeper of the Western Shore. As I mentioned, this is BOA Editions Reading and Conversation. These three poets here will read from and discuss their new collections, either that have been published recently this month or will be forthcoming this month from BOA Editions. Our panelists are Sheila Carter-Jones, Matthew Gelman, and Geffrey Davis. Our moderator is Executive Director and Publisher at BOA Editions, Peter Connors. Our panelists and our moderators' books will be available through Writers and Books' indie bookstore, & Books. I encourage you to read their full bios on our website, wab.org. Thank you.
All right, I think we are getting going here. So thanks to you all for being here. It's really great to see your faces. And I will say, just as a quick description, I am a white male with mostly gray hair and a goatee, and I'm wearing a gray jacket. So I have some questions for each of you, and then I have some that will sort of I'll give to you all to answer. And please feel free to expand on each other's answers too. Just consider this a discussion as opposed to me interviewing you each one at a time. I just do want to open up the floor for being able to expand on those things. But I thought I'd start with Matthew Gelman, who is the newest of the bunch. His debut collection, Before Light, was selected by Tina Chang as winner of BOA's annual A. Poulin Junior Poetry Prize contest. Tina wrote a wonderful foreword to the collection. So Matthew, I'm sure there are aspiring first book authors who will watch this video. And so I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about your manuscript's journey to publication, what that was like for you, and how winning the award has impacted your writing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter. And just to give a physical description, I am a white man wearing black round wire glasses with a brown beard, and I'm wearing a blue jacket. Um, yeah, so it was an unbelievable journey. I was sending my book out for 8 years, and I had been a finalist 13 times before the book was selected by Tina Chang for BOA. So definitely, I feel looking back that as frustrating as it could be in moments, I think we all know that it just takes incredible perseverance to get a book in the world. It takes a lot of commitment to the vision that you have for the book and commitment to keep revising and honing, etc. But it's funny. I look back on all those years of coming so close, so close, so close, and yet being far away. And I really kind of feel grateful for those years because I think I actually needed them, right? I think I needed the kind of the encouragement of being a finalist. I mean, being a finalist is incredible for sure and something to celebrate in and of itself. But I think definitely the knowledge that I was close but not quite there yet, it really, really pushed me to ask deeper questions about my work. And that was something I just kind of committed to, and it just made me hunker down even more and try to make the poems as developed as possible. And on top of that, I mean, I think we all don't love this poet, right? But Ted Hughes, on the back of Sylvia Plath's Collected, said something that really stayed with me. I read it when I was a young writer, and it became a big part of my revision process. He said, Sylvia never scrapped any of her poetic efforts. And if she couldn't get a poem to be a table, she made it a chair. And if it couldn't become a chair, she made it a stool. Right. And I thought that was kind of a clever, insightful way of talking about the process of just trying to make a book come to fruition, right? Is that you should save everything. You shouldn't completely give up on anything that you've written. Keep it in the scrapyard and see what you can kind of fashion out of it as you go year after year after year.
That's really what you're saying makes me think about. So I'm Geffrey Davis. I'm a multiracial, brown skin man with wearing glasses. My hair is black and cut short, and I have a short beard, mustache, and I'm wearing a white and black marbled sweater. And I also happen to have my first book win the Poulin Prize, and went through the editorial process with Peter. I don't know if you know this, Peter, but there was one poem. One thing that I love about the editorial process with you is cutting so many poems that made the book stronger, sort of clearing out some of the poems that were going to the same place but with different efficacy. But there was one poem in particular that was cut that was probably like my darling poem, and it was kind of ars poetic-y. And when you made that suggestion, like I agreed with it. But it was probably the hardest or the most emotional cut. The other ones didn't feel really emotional. And what I ended up doing was holding on to that poem and then sort of trojaned it into another poem that was published in my second book, also with BOA. So I even sort of to extend that sort of ways in which poems you can hold on to them and then they can grow or transform can happen across books too.
Absolutely. And I feel like sometimes that process might take years. It might be 6 years later, and you're like, you know what line would go perfect in that poem? And you can sort of reach back into that heap and pull it out. I'm sure everybody's done that at some level. And yeah, I think it's really, really good advice. The other thing I'll say, Matthew, that your answer made me think of, and I'll say this to all the people that we were sort of directing that answer to, which is those submitting manuscripts as well. I always tell people the hard part of my job is rejecting things. The easy thing is accepting because that's fun. But any given year, 1,000 people are getting rejection slips with my name on it. And so I'll say two things. One is that it's very true that you have to have a manuscript be just the right fit for the right place at the right time. BOA publishes 12 books a year and not all of them poetry. And we have like a first book contest that's one of those books and all sorts of different things. Two of them are usually prose. So it's a really narrow little slot to fit into. And the reality is I say no to dozens and dozens of excellent manuscripts every year just because I can't make them work, or I have something that's very similar by another poet. So it's just not something that we need that I feel will expand our list, suitably and so forth. So that's something that's good to keep in mind for people submitting. But the other thing is go back and look at your manuscript again, because you know what, maybe it does need some tweaking and maybe it doesn't. But that whole process, it's worth sort of taking another look before you send it out again and give it some consideration. And maybe it's just not the right fit, but maybe it does need a couple adjustments here and there. And time does wonders for being able to gain perspective on any piece of writing. Don't be afraid to step back for something for 6 months and look at it again. The world will go on. It'll be okay when you get it out on the 7th month, I promise. And chances are you'll find something that you could have adjusted a little bit.
That's great. Oh, excuse me. My name is Sheila Carter-Jones. I'm an African-American woman. I do not have a beard, and I don't want one. But talking about process, this book took so long to write, but I have been writing around it for years. I just couldn't get to the core, and finally, when I thought that I was at the core, I tried out for like an MFA program, and I lasted for 1 week because I thought I'm just not ready for this writing that I want to do. I just don't have the courage for it. And 2 years later, I rejoined the MFA program, and it was different because I was different. I had changed in some way where I could accept and at the same time challenge my own emotion that I wanted to go into each poem. And talking about reaching back to get a poem that might fit, I reached back probably 10 years and found a poem that I loved that poem, but it was never right for any other thing except for the book that just came out this time. And I had actually submitted the manuscript to a contest. I never win a contest. That's my main thought is, I'll just send it because I have to keep myself encouraged. And I know I'm not going to win. And sure enough, I didn't win. But I got the most beautiful rejection letter I had ever received in my life. And it felt like this is better than winning the contest. This rejection letter has shown me so much about my own writing that I more looked at the emotion, and I cared about the writing and how I was putting it on the page. But this rejection letter was more than I could have imagined. It was like a book for me. The rejection letter really, it lifted me. And then, to have the book, go on to BOA was just like such a treat for me. I just thought, well, I got another chance. I got another chance. And I may not win or anything, but just having another chance made me feel more confident about my own writing and the emotion that I was putting into it.
And I'd love to expand on that a little bit, Sheila, because I know that I'm realizing now too that people haven't heard you all read your poems yet. So they probably don't have a great idea of what your book specifically, the subject matter might cover, or what the emphasis of the book is. So maybe you can touch a little bit on what Every Hard Sweetness covers as far as content. And then also, I know when we've spoken before, you've shared with me the challenges that you had addressing this subject matter, and you've sort of picked it up and put it down. And obviously, it's very sensitive and close to you, or, it's about your life and your family and so forth. So I'm also curious what you were able to do in this time around that allowed you to write about this subject matter, that maybe you had not been able to complete that in previous drafts.
I think it was a trek. And I had reached a point on the mountain. It was not the peak, but it was a point at which I could kind of accept, the trauma that I had and that I had been pushing down for years and years and years. And one person, a poet, a famous poet actually, told me, never be embarrassed or ashamed of your life. Mm-hmm. And that opened me. And I just thought, I didn't even know I was embarrassed or ashamed. I just knew that I was hurting. And when those words, embarrassed and ashamed, came, I thought it made me see something different. That I'm dealing with shame and embarrassment, and I don't even know it. But as I started to write, it started to come out that not as embarrassment or shame, but as kind of like a victory, in a sense, over my own kind of. I don't want to call it a weakness, but a sadness, a hurting, something that just had kind of sat inside me like bedrock, and it started to crumble, and the poem started to come out. And I have to say, I think, of these poems, I wrote 17 of them in 1 month. That it was coming so quickly and so fast, and it was everything that I had been afraid of. But through the work, I could engage. It was like I was engaging myself in a mirror. But the physical me was much stronger. My emotional sense was much wider and much broader. That I could hold a lot more than what I thought I could.
Yeah. Geffrey, I'd love to turn to you for a minute. And as we said, your first book was published as winner of the Poulin Prize as well, Revising the Storm. That was selected by Dorian Lux, and she gave a forward to that. And that brought you into the BOA family. And then your next book was Night Angler, which went on to win the prestigious James Laughlin Award from the Academy of American Poets. And I'm so thrilled to continue to work with you on this new collection as well. So I wonder if you could, two things, maybe one, just really briefly give people an idea of what they can find in your new book, the subject matter and some of what it addresses, and also talk about the shift in your own writing between, your first, second, and third books, and how this one might differ from the first collection.
Yeah. So the third book does kind of what the second book did with relation to the first, which is it picks up the work that poetry has afforded me at the moment that I am right now, hopefully reflecting back and having grown in possibility and contemplation to what the other first two books maybe started to figure out. But I used to joke, in fact, I just told this joke last night that when book two came out, I said book one was about my daddy issues. And book 2 is about my daddy issues. And I feel like book 3 kind of moves away somewhat. Like that's the biggest difference, is how I mean, my father still features in that book for sure, and he's still kind of in the approximation of whatever reckoning the book is taking on. But I feel like book 1 was a sort of, what do I want to say, like a document sort of recording where I had worked myself towards without knowing. And it wasn't until the book came into the world that I looked back and thought, oh, what I did was I saved myself from banishing the word father. Like for a long time, I thought I just needed space from father, and ended up writing a book that reclaimed the word father. And at the end of that book, I become a father. And so that was the kind of ironic, really grateful turn in that book. And then book 2 was, as a father, was sort of, oh shit, like what did I do or not do? And started a conversation with my son, now mostly as the father, while still returning to my parental concerns as a child of a low functioning addict. And book 3 is like, this has been in a lot of ways the scariest book for me. Like there's a fear of not knowing what you're doing. There's a fear of worrying that you haven't done what you thought you've done. And then this book is more, my life changed so much during the making of the book. Like it started off as I was very clear about the book, and then it shifted really dramatically towards the end. And I was writing this essay, Keisha Kuipers, who's another fabulous BOA poet, invited me to write this essay on failure. And I was reflecting at the time about how I thought I could get back a kind of intimacy or access to loved ones in book 1. And for all that I got back, like a lot of those loved ones were further than ever. And that's been a grief of mine, is taking seriously the ways in which these poems are prayers to renew or reclaim or redeem connections. And what do you do when those people feel in different ways further than ever? Like it's easy for grief to kind of seep into that book. In this book, it started off very, very differently. Like it was this book length, these nighttime epistolary poems to my now ex-wife, and really trying to make reconnection across grief, across loss. And as that relationship was falling apart, I was trying to figure out, well, then what is this book then in the midst of this? If I already know that reconnection is not what this book is about, what can this book be? And I actually threw the book away for a while, and then took it out of the trash and kind of asked it what it could do. And it ends up being a book that reckons with that relationship, but then turns back towards myself in a way which I thought I'd done before, but I actually realized I had never done before. So that's a rambly, wandery way to kind of tell you I'm still kind of figuring out what I think this book is intervening in my own kind of head and heart. But that's kind of the trajectory that I can speak to at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to direct this question more to Matthew, but it's something that is definitely overlap in all of your books. So please just keep it in mind, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. In Matthew's book, there's a lot of poems about childhood, and he uses like shadows, light, mirrors, and also your brother, his presence sort of juxtaposed against yours. And all of these things create this sort of mysterious, almost like a veil over childhood, which to me felt very accurate to how, a lot of us, and I'll just say for myself, like how we remember and imagine our childhood. It does have this sort of mystery to it, and there's like this gauzy veil over it. And I'm wondering if you writing about your childhood, and specifically maybe your relationship with your brother and your parents, if that gave any more clarity through this sort of gauzy veil of childhood memories.
Absolutely. That's a good question. I would say absolutely it did in the long run. I think in the process of doing it, it's really, really, as Geffrey was just attesting to, it's really hard to write vulnerably and openly about your family. And one thing that definitely I had to grapple with, and I'm still grappling with a little bit, is now that I've written the book and now that I've committed to that project and now that it's in the world, having very frank conversations with my family about the different ways in which we remember things. Right. And that was something that I always knew that was probably going to be waiting on the other side of the book coming out. But now having the experience is really, really, really eye-opening and interesting, because as much as I'm aware that I feel that my memories are accurate and valid, right? At the same time, I'm also aware that I'm remembering things according to the last time that I actually remembered them literally, if that makes sense. So it's like an impression of a memory from a long time ago. And that is where I really kind of tried to. Lucy Brock-Broido gave me incredible advice when I was her student. And this has really stayed with me. She basically said, if you can't remember something perfectly, or if you're questioning your own memory, or if you're just engaging with the slipperiness of memory, consciously try to write into the gaps, right? So for example, if you had this experience where you remember, right, let's just say one kind of fight with a partner or fight with a sibling, right? And you remember it ended one way, right, with there being peace, but in actuality, it turned into a fight that lasted days and days and days. Like, let's just say that it turned into a feud rather than a resolution. Right into which, take the one that you are kind of convinced is more what happened, and just flip it and say, okay, but what if I engage with this event a little differently? What if I give it a different conclusion or a different resolution, and see what that does for the poems, right? So if there's this, family trip that went incredibly poorly, right? Write a poem about a family trip that went incredibly well, right? That was more joyful or more positive, right? And as a result, that way you can kind of create more texture, more variety in the work, but you can also really kind of write into the slipperiness of memory in a way that feels less about being accurate and more about getting to the heart of an emotion, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, thank you. And Sheila, you obviously, there's a lot of your childhood experiences very different than Matthew's, but you have that same sense of that sort of childhood mystery and not quite knowing what's going on and trying to figure it out. And with your book, I especially felt like we have this small girl who's right on the edge of adolescence, of having this larger grasp of the adult world around her. And it's almost like that middle ground, like we see you as the reader, we're taking that step with you. And so I wonder about, I guess, first of all, I wonder, is that accurate? Does that feel accurate to you, to hear that what I experienced with your book as a girl, sort of learning things that would help her understand the world more as an adolescent and then soon after as an adult?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. I, just coming off of Matthew's memory, that I was at points where I was mixing memories, and somehow when I actually looked up what something actually looked like, it was nowhere near what the mixture of memories that I had. So I was the only African American student in my class of 398, and and everybody was most of the kids were rich and white, and I came from a small coal mining town. I was bussed in, and the things that I think I remembered were just kind of things that had blown up in my mind that rich people have, or rich people, how they act, what they do. And so my memory fused with that section of my life with the section where my dad was actually beaten by cops and taken to a state hospital for the criminally insane during the civil rights movement. So those two worlds clashed, but they not only clashed, but they kind of intersected, so that I ended up with coming up with like a full kind of memory that I'm not sure which part goes to which section of my life, but they've come together to make a book. And one thing I wanted to say about the book is that I'm really was concerned with the treatment of African American males, and how the in my small coal mining community, the black section, we were calling them ethnic pockets. So I was in the ethnic pocket of what was called the colored town, and how everybody in the town became kind of silent about what had happened with my dad because they thought the same thing could happen to them. And the other kind of mixture was that all the women did domestic work in the rich section of town, which was kind of, I don't know what to call it, like a double consciousness, as Du Bois talked about, or how to travel in a life that has both sides, to make it one life. And I think that's what I was trying to get together in this book is this, all these things that are happening, like how do I manage to function as an African-American woman and like actually a young girl and not get kind of waylaid in some kind of deep anger, which I actually did have, but it rarely manifested. I was holding that down as well. But just how to hold down what if it comes out untrained and untamed, will make something wild happen, in my life. So I've taken all of that and that about me, and I actually taught school for many years, and I've had about 17 boys that never reached the age of 19, actually, and 3 girls. So I'm writing about them now, and it's this idea of how do you make or help other people see the humanity of other people. And I think that kind of is like my main theme. This is my dad, a man with a family, a community. We're doing as well as we can in a little coal mining town. And there was such great communication, great relationships with families and everything. But how that can be broken, and how that can frighten you, that when you enter into the larger society, you have, at least I should say I, had this like fear of, oh, here I am, the only African-American girl in a class of 398, woo, 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 woo. How do I hold myself together? How do I manage to maintain like my humanity or my sense of self? So now, and then having taught in all these kids, boys actually being killed, how do I show their humanity? Like when I had them in 8th grade, they were nothing. They were just kids. They weren't seen as monsters or gangsters. And I want to bring out that particular, I guess, seed that shows that they really are human little boys. They never reached the age of 19 or 20 even. And, and they had something to offer. They weren't just wild animals running the streets.
Thank you, Sheila. I got to say, that just brought to mind, to me, the most heart-wrenching and powerful scene in the collection is after your father has been released from this unjust imprisonment and is home, and you go into their bedroom at night, just sort of as children do, just sort of creeped in to get some socks or something. I forget exactly what out of the drawer. And your dad, having just come out of incarceration, where you don't creep into somebody's room at night without that person getting startled and reacting, has his natural reaction to hearing something in the night. And it's just, you can see this. It's 2 people just having honest, real reactions to what's happening in that moment. You turn and you run out, and you can just, it's so heart-wrenching because it's like this attempt to make a connection, what could have been this wonderful, tender moment that has been sort of torn apart by the circumstances that happened with your father. Anyway, there's not a question there. I'm sorry, but that's what I had to say that because it's a scene that I just go back to over and over. It's just sort of summing up so much about what's going on in the collection. And Geffrey, I guess we'll just continue this childhood into adulthood thing and parent thing. But Geffrey, one thing I noticed in this collection specifically, because you did talk a lot more about your father and so forth in the first couple collections, is I saw you talking about very adult subject matter in this stuff in the midst of raising your son. And it hit me that these are the kind of adult interactions that kids experience from the fringe and that take on this sort of mysterious, glow to them. Like, I know something's going on. I know it's very emotional. At the same time, I'm not fully being let in on it, but and so the kid's mind starts to sort of go into that. And so what we have, I think, through the course of your books in particular, is somebody going from being, the child to being the father, and being very aware perhaps of the mistakes of the past that you don't want to repeat, that you've experienced, but at the same time inevitably creating this sense of mystery, because we're adults and you don't share everything with kids, right, and all this stuff. So boy, there's another non-question there, but maybe you could respond to my
Well, what you're saying makes me think about the very first moments when my son was in the world autonomously, like holding him for the first time and having this really, really like growing wave of like, I don't got it in me to do what this child person needs, like this wave of fear of all the things I hadn't figured out. And gratefully, and I think this tension I was taught through, I think I truly believe, like through poetry, is that there is this counterpoint of, I can't afford to be more afraid of how I'm not ready to not turn towards this moment and bear witness and pull whatever I can in response to the moment that we're in. Like, I can't let the past have such bearing that I'm not present for the moment. And I can't be too concerned with like the future possibility or consequences of what I don't feel I have resourced with. Like I have to hold those intentions so that I can be present in this moment with this person. And I think I learned that from poetry. The other thing that I'm thinking about is there's a way in which being the victim of certain traumas and abuses as a child, I am susceptible or guilty of overcompensating too, and being mindful of that. And the bet that I've placed on raising my son around language is we don't police or like, I don't police the words that he uses. There's a few select words that I'm like, I don't know if you have a history enough with this word, or I don't know if you know enough of this word's resonance to wield it with what you need to take accountability for what the word can do in terms of pain. But I tend not to kind of police the words that come out of my son's mouth. For us, it's like tone is the thing, intention, precision, complexity. And I think a part of that bet was knowing as a child, there were things that I felt like I didn't have permission to say. And because of that, I didn't know how to ask for help or talk about things that were happening in secrecy that I could have maybe been rescued from. And so I was really afraid of him being in a context outside of my ear where someone's using language to keep him silent in the pain that I want him to be able to share. So that's the kind of seepage between my poetics and my attempt to raise my son, and also like what book 2 manifested in, because he's maybe 2 or 3 when I start writing that book. And I have this friend in my friend from grad school, not long ago, was like reminiscing about how I used to, my son would ask me very simple, straightforward questions, and I would give him sort of like dissertation defense or comprehensive exams kind of answers to really simple questions, because I was just so worried that I wasn't giving him the information that he might have accidentally asked for. And that book kind of has that that dynamic where I suspected that there were things that my son was going to have to face that if I waited until he asked me, I would already miss the main intervention or the main opportunity. And so I had this urgency. Like, I couldn't wait to start conversations. I didn't know how to have them in person all the way. So poetry was a place where I could kind of have a more timeless conversation about things that I wasn't sure when to start, but I suspected that I needed to start yesterday. And so that book became, and I see Night Angler, my second book, is this book length love letter trying to start conversations that I don't know when or why or how to have, that I hope will bleed into our interpersonal connections. So, and I know it's a risk, like that. I don't know yet what it cost me to start the conversation before I knew when. But I do know when that book was first published and he read it aloud to me, he got to one poem in particular that's about this mole on his body. And when he got to the title, he got really, really upset. And I was like, no, well, read the poem. And he read the poem, and the poem was about not telling the world this thing. And when he got to that poem, he's like, okay, Dad, this is a good book. And so that was the only review that I really cared about, was him accepting going to what might be uncomfortable things that I couldn't, like, my heart didn't know how to afford to wait for those conversations. And I think that's another thing that poetry excels at, is not waiting for the time that's going to feel right and trying to hold instead tension between, of course, I could always get this wrong, but I don't know if I can afford to wait. And if I acknowledge that, what can I say into that space?
Yeah, that's excellent. I think it's really funny, kind of an ironic, when you first become a parent, you're so concerned that you're not going to know what to do and you're going to do the wrong things and all this stuff. And it takes a few years to realize you absolutely will make mistakes and you absolutely will do the wrong things. And that's just part of it, right? Just like everything else. But you're such a thoughtful father, and that comes through so much in your writing. It's really a pleasure to look at and to read. And I think particularly, and I'll start with Matthew with this one, particularly because all of your books have such personal subject matter in them, I'm curious what you hope readers will glean from your books, and also what you're most excited about and nervous about in sharing your books with the public audience. So Matthew, could you start with that one?
Absolutely. I have so many thoughts after what Geffrey just said too. Hopefully this will connect to my answer. But yeah, I think in terms of childhood in my book and in terms of writing the past in my book, something that I had to revisit a lot of was specifically how, I think childhood can be a disempowering experience for many people. I think we are a country that doesn't really always respect children's rights, right? And I think specifically looking at that from a queer perspective and thinking about being closeted, with a twin brother who was also closeted, and we were both dealing with it in such incredibly different ways, even though our lives were so parallel for so many years. And I think looking back at those years of my life and trying to kind of write them honestly, write them vividly, and to fill in the gaps, as we were discussing earlier, in memory, I think something that I definitely really wanted to do was to write a queer childhood, write about the pain of queer childhood, but in a way that could give queer kids a little more agency over their experiences and give them a little more language to talk about the loneliness of being closeted, the fear of rejection, the experience of being a suspect in your family and in your community. I mean, I think the tricky push-pull of queer childhood, even still, I think, is people are suspicious of queer children, but it's not a how do I put this? They show interest in queer children and they are paying attention to them, but it's not genuine attention, it's suspicion, right? It's trying to kind of coax a secret out, right? Mm-hmm. So I think definitely something that I want is a lot of gay kids to read the book and feel like it resonates with them and feel like maybe it has some bearing on their experiences, and maybe not. Maybe they read it and they're like, I don't know, the world has really changed, and that would be cool too. That would actually be really cool too. So definitely I want that. I want it to reach young LGBTQ kids. That would absolutely send me over the moon if that was the main audience for the book. And something that I'm definitely kind of nervous about, or not, maybe not nervous, but just something that's been coming up in my mind, is making sure that the book, and I think I achieved this, but that it has honesty, but also with the right amount of compassion for everybody involved, right? I want to kind of find that balance of holding people accountable and being frank, but not blaming, if that makes sense. And I think finding that happy medium in tone is something I really work towards in the book, and I hope that comes through.
Sheila, can I ask you to answer the same question, and then Geffrey?
Well, I wanted everybody in the world to know about what, and in a personal way, but at the same time, me explain it a little bit better. In a personal way, the people that knew me would know a personal story, but people who didn't know me would not know a personal story, but they would know a story. And the story that I'm talking about is one that has been kind of hushed in the African American community. These kinds of things that happened are afraid to like come out for some kind of long ago fear. And if at all, it's talked about, it's whispered. And I wanted it to come out into the open, and I didn't want it to be kind of hushed or shushed in a way that that didn't happen to African American people. And what's interesting, I go to New Mexico every year, and I met this guy up in Taos, up at the spa, and he was a white guy, and he kept turning around. We were in line to get towels and all that. He said, "Hey, sister." I said, "What this guy doing calling me sister? This is crazy." Not only that, he was with his white girlfriend, or a friend, and I kept thinking, this is really strange. And anyway, my first pool that I go to is the arsenic pool, and he was in there, and I thought, oh my God, I can't believe this guy's in the arsenic pool, and I can't turn around and go another way. I'll look like suspicious. So I get in the pool, and he says, "Hey, sister." I'm thinking, I said, "Man, where are you from?" And he said, "Oh, I'm from Mississippi." I said, "Mississippi?" Yeah, he said, "I'm from Indianola, Mississippi." And you know what? I'm from Indianola, Pennsylvania. And something, yeah, it was so weird. And he started to explain how he used to fight with together with Fannie Lou Hamer in Mississippi during the Civil Rights Movement. And I just thought that was such it wasn't even a coincidence. It was like a planned meeting somehow, some kind of way. But I just, that kind of encouraged me, like I am going the right way. That, I am writing into a history that it has been silenced, omitted, erased. But I wanted to come out in a personal story first, but I still wanted everybody to know about it. I just got a call from a friend, a white friend, woman, who she was crying when she was talking to me. She said, "I just got your book and I started reading it." And she was like really crying. And I was thinking, well, geez, calm down. You know, it's you know me from that. I've been talking about this for years. I just had never put it to page, and so I do want everybody to know about it. But and what her tears did for me was make me stronger, in my conviction, and not in a like a dangerous kind of angry kind of way, but in a way that could open up dialogue, to talk about things. And it's more one-on-one, doesn't have to be big, but it can travel in different, directions and in different paths. And one thing that scares me is that my siblings will read the book. I haven't sent them a book. And the reason, my sister, every time I mention it or try to get more information from her about the experience, she starts crying and goes in a totally different direction. She won't even talk about it after all these years. And my brothers, all they do is start cursing. They're still very angry, and they're just they kind of talk about it in the way of cursing. And I know when to back off and just calm down. But I'm most afraid of my siblings reading the book.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Geffrey.
Yeah, there's so much resonant considerations that I'm having with both y'all. I think about how, like, one of the risks of going to vulnerable places that are uncertain recovery or reckoning with past, especially trauma, is that you're leaving the reader and maybe even yourself subconsciously in a space that's hasn't moved toward as much healing as you hope. And so I really fear the ways in which working with the reality that there have been times in my life that I've gone through things that it was easy to imagine not coming back from them or not recovering a kind of whole sense of self. And acknowledging that is not the same thing as giving power back to that reality. Like I go to those places to shore up the fact that I did come back, and I'm continuing to come back and continuing to heal. And so what I hope is that this book shows one of the core lessons I've been grappling with the last couple of years is I'm really grateful for the ways in which my first book taught me to create compassionate space in my heart for especially my father and childhood experiences. My second book pushed me to sort of continue that compassion work with my father in the name of my son, and also, building a parental relationship that felt safe and that kind of had a safe eye on who he was becoming and who I didn't want him to become, or who of me I didn't want him to have to live through. And this third book, what I'm realizing is all that compassion work, which is absolutely sacred and necessary, turning a kind of compassion outward is not the same literacy as turning a singular compassion inward. And so this book, what I hope is that this book is picking up what feels like a really, really young toddler level self-compassion journey that I will forever be on. And one of my fears is because the book was sort of started and continued in the midst of a failed relationship, that failure almost compromised my belief in that compassion journey. And I fear that, and this is maybe more like my relationship to the book, but has the book recovered from that failure, accepted that failure, and continued to own and claim all the self-compassion that we deserve. So I fear how much the book is marked by that failure of that relationship. But I think the book needed to kind of hit that and then work its way out of it, because that's kind of what the book did for me. So
I think of Matthew's, comment too about different people see the exact same situation in different ways and even at different times. And I'll quickly share, because this just happened to me. So my first book that came out was a memoir called Growing Up Dead. And I was talking about my childhood and going to Grateful Dead concerts and things like that. But in the course of it, I talked about a person I was kind of marginally friends with. And the parents were divorced, and I never saw the father, but I know that he was with the mother all the time. So I made a sort of a comment in the book about the father just not being a part of their lives. And after the book came out, I ran into him and he said, that really wasn't fair. Like my dad, we went over to my dad's house every week. We had dinner, that wasn't a fair characterization. And so I went on, and this came up for me. I kept thinking like, oh gosh, I really did this guy wrong. I did, I got that part wrong in the book. And it just stayed with me, and I even brought it up at different times when people asked about the book, is there anything you wish you had, done differently or anything? I saw him last week and I said to him, I've thought about this. The book came out 12 years ago. I've thought about this so many times. And I just want to say, I'm really sorry that I mischaracterized your relationship with your father and how he fit into your lives and so forth. And he goes, oh no, he was an asshole. So he's like, it's fine. I think, you're right. He was a jerk.
Wow.
So it's like his own, he was really, when he brought that up to me, he was kind of hurt and burned. And now he was also authentically saying, no, you had it right. So things shift over time, right? All we can do is tell our truths at the moment and hope that the honesty, as much as we can bring it, comes through and shine some light on the situation from our vantage point, at least. So thank you all for your clarity and for your honesty. And what I'd love is to have each of you share 5 to 7 minutes of poetry with everybody. And I think what we'll do is just go in order. So we'll have Matthew read first, and then Sheila, and then Geffrey. So maybe what you could do is, as you get to your last poem, just say, this is my last poem. That'll sort of cue the next reader that they're going to go. I'm going to take myself off the screen while you all do that. But thank you so much for all those wonderful answers. And I'm so excited for everyone to hear your poems now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. That was a really beautiful conversation. I really appreciate it. And it's good to meet you both. So I'm just going to read a couple poems from the book, which came out exactly 8 days ago, which is crazy to me. And it's been a lot of fun. So I'll start with the first couple of poems, which I think give a pretty good overview of what's in store later in the collection. As Peter was kind of talking about, there's so much mirroring in the book. There's so much looking to a brother figure or to an imagined sister figure as almost kind of a mirror or double image of the self. And I've been thinking a lot since I started writing this book, and even now in newer work, is what do we learn about ourselves by kind of looking at a twin figure, or kind of looking at a double of ourselves, but a double that just has a slight difference, right? What do we kind of learn about the self by looking in an imperfect mirror, if that makes sense? So there's kind of a lot of that and a lot of imagining possibilities for the self. The first poem is called So Much Light. The cracked blue leaf of cemetery that used to make me falter. Where else could my mind slow hum its hours of practiced evasion? Childhood smell of tin bright cold and snow dust coating the pepper of crows that visit the branches of my walk home through a present I will never be unhooked from. I want my lips to split the lit space between the words dance and don't. To know my mother before the mishap of her early marriage, how she walked to school each morning of her girlhood, a rudiment, wringing the ice from her hair, her head turned down and silent as a sacrifice to wind. So much light coming off of the mirror and rivering through the hush of the bathroom where I stood in her lipstick, pilfered jewelry, strange dominion of closed doors. Some nights talking into the mirror, waiting for it to talk back, mimicking her posture. Even now, each dawn a knot music, I climb. Replica. I wear a gray sweater not unlike the one my father used to wear, his beard beginning to hang from his face in his student years, dew pooling on the sleeves. I see him walking the autumn campus with a cone of chrysanthemums flaring in his hand, swaddled in newspaper wrapping, each petal slanted a little, as memory is. It's easier to go back this far, past marriages, mornings of dressing for work in the dark, his voice slick with caffeine, mud on the front lawn clinging to each jaded step. I'd rather remember the sapling, my father, 19, knocking on a woman's green door, and the way the self emerges in the noon-lit stillness just before it hears the word yes. In this one life, with its boundaries set by snow, its laws cemented in air, all we get is a moment to think that we are permitted more than a moment. I bought it, this cheap sweater, the color of sleep, a little worn at the shoulders. It is not beautiful like the past, but like the past, I wear it. I'm just going to read one more. So this is a poem that I wrote and it was really put through a lot over the years. I changed it a million times, again and again and again. But I wanted to write a number of poems that kind of imagine a sister relationship, right? A sister who could be kind of an ally or a sympathizer, right, to the speaker as a young kid. And this is one of those sister poems. It's called The Wheat Field. I came to the wheat field to look for my sister, but my sister was not there. There was only sunlight fanning the silence and getting all over the things that it owned, and the taste of the sunlight, the taste of a white linen dress pulled over my head. And each time I turned to look closer at myself, I turned from myself. As a girl, my mother didn't like to dance. At night, she walked around those blocks of row homes, standing like graves in the soil, avoiding the gymnasium. She reached a parking lot overgrown with grass where she could lie down, unflooded by headlights, could think, could look at the imperfect animal stillness of every star. At the school dance, I stood almost ghost, at the edge of the purple lights. Then, being driven home, words were heavy-footed and the field almost broken by blizzard. But I still thought I could point out the few soft crops still cowering in their stalks, my face always looking for something beating inside what was hardly there. I come to the wheat field to look for my sister, but my sister is not here. My sister is somewhere asleep in the sun inside her. My sister lives only inside. She will never see this night, will not find me watching these airplanes disappear. I don't know where they're going, but I watch them go. All right.
Thank you, Matthew. That was great. Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to read my first poem. Is about my father. And this, oh, you'll see in the poem, but this is something that happens in the African American community, and it's almost like a holdover from slavery. The darker you are, the scarier you are. The more light skin your complexion, the more trustworthy you can work in the big house. But this happens in the African American, at least what I know of there's colorism even within the African American community. That is not just in the wider society, but so this Dark Boy. It is a story about my father. My mother whispered it even when he wasn't around and couldn't hear. The first time I heard the story, it scared me. It began with his mother, Ruth, who was ashamed of my father's skin. It was too dark for her to love. Until then, I didn't know love apart from skin. It is how I began to notice difference. Unlike Ruth's first boy born red-brown and the girl born with cornmeal yellow skin, my father's complexion was a curse cast on Ruth's belly. He was born dark and illegitimate. Evil from the start is how people judged him by his color. He was mistake enough, yet became the stain that his mother made, and because of his darkness, he was labeled troublemaker by sight. And then I imagine my father at the gate to the state hospital for the criminally insane. He stands, a man, forced, handcuffed. A ray of sun glints against gentle brown skin. The light makes his red-rimmed eyes flutter like two petals of a rose that shiver in a storm. He looks up at bars until the back of the skull rests on top of the spine. The cervical vertebrae that allows him to nod, yes, sir, no, sir. Bars go up high like the beanstalk Jack climbed to make it to a make-believe land in the sky. Unless the black bars turn into magic beans, there is no geography of imagination behind them. No fairy tale made real except for the smell of blood, the sound of bones being cracked. Ordinary men, like giant ogres, will keep the man gone dead, hidden in sprawling beauty of Pennsylvania mountains. They protect years of stone-hard infrastructure. And as any family man would, they work to take care of their own castles, wives, and children they love, and they are violent too. Inside the gate, they redistribute weight of duty. Their at-home bodies swell with growl and bark, cryptic as any god who breeds fear. Monster feet in steel-toe boots demand to keep the head turned away from truth. Keep the body tense, braced for the next kick. When they finish terrorizing their captives, all creep home, transform, become normal as any man who wants his children to have more than he ever had. They say, that's how it is. I did my job. Then I imagine the gate to the state hospital for the criminally insane. Riding for 5 hours, I imagine the gate at the entrance to the state hospital for the gone dead. It is like the one that swings open on Oak Drive where rich kids live. I go to school with them. Each black bar is tipped with a metal-shaped arrowhead, razor sharp to cut straight through to soft tissue. There's no escaping wealth. It's in the muscle and fat of the institution. The gate's hinges for the unhinged keep what's wanted in, what's not out. Bars like ribs surround the heart of the establishment, protected by law. When we get close, I see the gate is wide open. We pass through a bent chain link fence that's chest high on a 6-foot man. I imagine I can hurl myself over with a running start. My father could hurdle it, walk home. There have been higher leaps and longer distances to begin again. As the car drifts toward a tiny building, I expect to see a man in uniform. If he waves us in, I know his welcome will be condescending, his words hard as flint. If a gun is holstered on his hip, a nickel-plated handle will protrude to dare a wrong move, or word, or tone of voice. I keep the gate that separates me from school snobs in my head to ground myself in what I know, how far I have come, yet still question how much farther to see my father between now and home. No guard stops us, questions us. We park between tire-worn yellow lines, boundaries marked for visitors. The place is quiet, not peacefully quiet, but hauntingly still. And the bucolic landscape fills me with the geography of silence. And then my last one. My father did come home after 6.5 years, and he started his own business and worked it for 20 some years. And he actually employed all the young boys in the neighborhood so they could have a job. And so this is what soil makes. Out of the gone dead sanctuary, a man emerges with a dream of free. Beneath flesh and inside his bones is marrow of future. Though his bare shoulders curl inward, I ache to see the muscular bulk of his back bent under the hood of his red pickup, the one he painted his name on freehand to show ownership. He added, and sons, hoping to pass on not a landscaping business, but ability to be one that saw it, each falling into the other, their boy bodies soft as summer soil as they hugged in their frailty. I did not laugh. I could see what my father's eyes held. Though I am not a boy, I picked up a rake and dragged its rusted teeth across patches of wilted grass. In each small ditch of earth, I dropped seeds, covered them with dirt, and knelt to offer handfuls of water to grow a new start. My brothers could never dream as free as my father, to reseed, begin again in soil of flesh, and endure tenderness of new growth. Cut and shape twigs of forsythia to prepare for burst of yellow blossoms. Dig up half-wick stumps. Plant 2 yews with roots that grow straight through the eyes of the dead. Hold them tethered down under. My brothers can never be green again. No ambition to unload dumps of steaming manure. Shovel shit, never, they said. Will not plant geraniums or peonies ever. And one small detail about the phone number painted on the truck, they knew it by heart. Thank you.
Thank you to Matthew and Sheila. I'm so grateful to be here with you two in conversation. And thank you to Peter and to BOA Editions for remaining a house that I want to keep writing and living in. So, and to Writers and Books for hosting us. This has been really a wonderful time to continue to think through what we're aspiring towards and grappling with. So I'm grateful. I'm going to read 3 short poems from One Wild Word Away, which is out next week. Okay. Hearth. Tonight, a storm, and I hear weak humming drift down the throat of this rain-voiced house. My son is asleep when I check, but the first notes sounded like the softness of him upstairs, learning by singing to soothe his own doubts. I've answered that hymnal despair before. I've been that odd wonder, no hidden talent, just the boy who, if asked, would let a room of unhomed siblings hear him trying to hush the terror his own mind could not contain, but for song. Nightmares taught me young, when the pale lady from my dreaming began to blur with waking life. For days I trembled through the winded dark of our tired trailer to know the frightening figure had not returned from our family. I whispered strange psalms from bed to bed, window to window, banishing fear's face. I must have sung. I can't imagine me back without the singing. So I tell any self not yet tucked inside a warm, if dreamless rest, sing for home, sing, then sleep. This next one is called Crow, to the child survivor that lives in me. Dearness, my hand won't stop brushing the rough bark of the redbud. You didn't believe we'd live to see flower again. And I can smell the wind-fallen leaves involved in the dark work we still have left before we embrace in the one night all bodies must lie down in. But not today. Today, the neighborhood crows and traveling geese are singing of arrival. We made it. We made it. Thin light slanting gently through this busy air. Thank you for filling up our lungs between each suffering back then, for giving us what we needed to get here, where I pick one of this season's last edible seeds just to feel your smile's old rarity stumble across the quiet warmth of my mouth stage. Often we were racked with unthinkable grief, and more sorrow is surely on its way. But we were blessed by something too. And today, the soft light, the coarse tree with its crisp pods, the singing wind, and this absurd swell of gratitude for how you outlived the awful weight that fear can make of longing, which I've come to assure you, we find bright ways to survive. And this is the last poem. Thank you again for this time together. And it's called Unfinished. Despite losing the dining table to it for weeks, our family stays with the puzzle, teetering plates upon knees before the television, and then returning to the soft symphony of shifting the oneness of a cardboard shape into the satisfied oneness of another. Over and over, the thousand little clicks of pleasure. More than that, if you count how, from time to time, someone will recognize the need to undo what we took for perfection, but what in fact was silently stalling the possibility of seeing the thing through, until someone else, or that same someone, plucks out the problem piece, resetting the bell for an actual perfect. Family, isn't this what we're after? No one says, all hunched and humming above the unfinished quiet that buoys our separate shared work. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you so much. What a treat to hear you read those poems, and they're so powerful. And I hope everybody picks up the books and checks them out and gets the chance to have you sign them at some point down the road too. I'm not sure if Sakshi wants to come back on and say anything for Writers and Books, but thank you to Writers and Books for hosting us as well. Always appreciate it.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew, Geffrey, Sheila, and Peter. And thank you to BOA Editions for everything that you do. Thanks for being here today and for sharing your time and your work with us. It's been such a gift sharing this time with you. As a reminder, the books of our panelists and our moderator are available through Ampersand Books, and I encourage you to support everyone here in any way that you can. Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. Have a good one, everybody.
You
Yeah,
too.
you too.